And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium the moderator for our next panel discussion, Brandon Reich, Senior Director, Surveillance Solutions for Pivot 3. Here's Brandon.
Okay, hello. Thank you everyone for being here. I was reminded that we are the last presentation, so congratulations, you made it to the very end. I was also reminded that we're the last one between you and lunch, so to keep it fast, right, and move it quickly. Luckily, we saved the best for last for you, hopefully, right, we think. I actually enjoyed that last panel presentations on UAVs. I come from the video storage side of the industry, so as far as I'm concerned, the more places we have cameras, the more cameras we have, the better, generating video and data. So we have a really exciting talk today. We're going to talk to you about what's happening in the world of video surveillance. We have gathered an expert panel up here that I'll introduce here in just a moment. And then I'm going to set the stage a little bit for these people to kind of talk about what's happening in the industry, what's happening in the world of video surveillance, what some of the changes are. And then I'll turn it over to the panel of experts here and let them talk about their respective areas. And then we'll, at the very end, we'll open it up for questions for everyone. So first, to introduce the panel, I'll start with Neil Lakomiak. Neil is the UL's Director of Business Development and Innovation for its Building and Life Safety Technologies Business Division. In this role, Neil is responsible for identifying and cultivating ideas for new services that add value to the built environment value chain and help mitigate loss to life and property. He also assists clients in enabling new technologies and innovation in the life safety and security industries. Next, we have Otto Laufer. Otto is the Homeland Security Division Program Project Manager at the Santa Ana Police Department. He is responsible for management, oversight, and monitoring of regional projects funded through the Federal Department of Homeland Security's Urban Areas Security Initiative grant. His expertise includes projects related to personal protective equipment, CBRN detection, critical infrastructure, physical security protection, and wireless video surveillance systems. He also serves as the Department Terrorism Liaison Officer with the Orange County Intelligence Assessment Center. And last but not least, we have Rob Heil. Rob is the General Manager of the Florida Operations of Securityne Systems. In this role, he focuses on driving market opportunities and building relationships with key customers and valued partners. He most recently served as Director of Enterprise Command Centers for SureView Systems. Rob has more than 25 years of security industry experience encompassing sales and business leadership, as well as driving strategic market opportunities and further positioning companies as leaders in their respective target markets. Okay. So before we turn it over to these guys, I just want to spend a minute or two here talking about what's happening in the world of security and video surveillance in particular. As we know, as we've spent a lot of time talking about the last couple of days, the risk and threat profile at everyone's organizations are changing. We have new assets to protect, we have new risks, we have new threats against those risks, everything's changing. At the same time, whether you're a government organization, whether you're a corporation, an institution of some sort, we're getting constant pressures from our organizations to show better return on our investments in security technologies. And of course, those technologies themselves are advancing rapidly. And we're going to talk a little bit about that here in the next few minutes. But what all this means is that we're actually seeing increased cost, increased complexity, and worst case, we're seeing an overall, sometimes an ineffectiveness of our security and our video surveillance systems to really do the job that they were originally intended for. So the landscape of video surveillance is changing significantly. We've talked a little bit about this. We're seeing higher and higher resolution cameras, up to 30 plus megapixel cameras out there. We're seeing new use cases of those cameras, right? We just heard about the UAVs now with video capabilities, high resolution, very specialized video capabilities inside. We're seeing things like body-worn cameras and in-vehicle cameras, all kinds of new use cases for cameras. At the same time, we're seeing longer and longer retention time for video data need to be stored for various reasons. And we're seeing the prices of those cameras come down. So the ultimate result of that is that the amount of data now being generated by video surveillance systems is exploding. In fact, there's an organization that has forecasted that by next year, IP video surveillance systems will generate north of 1,500 petabytes of data every single day. To put that into perspective, that's 3 times as much data as was being generated by those same systems just 2 years ago. So the amount of data being generated is doubling roughly every 18 months now, which is a pretty staggering number. And there's another organization that has recently said that 50% of the data produced by the Internet of Things, one of the big buzzwords out there, will come from video surveillance systems in the year 2020. So huge amounts of data. That data is much more important to us now. It's being used for new things that hasn't been used for in the past. And so we're seeing a paradigm shift now in the landscape of how we store, protect, and manage that data. You know, it used to be that video surveillance was a very closed system, closed circuit television, right? That's what we called it, closed systems. We put it in a closet somewhere, we turned it on, and we hope it worked. And we didn't know that anything was wrong until we needed it, right? Until we went back and found it. Now we're seeing that transition more to an IT-centric type of function. It's moving into the data centers. It's being owned, at least partially, more and more by IT departments, or at least being included in IT's daily operating procedures. And the IT world thinks differently. They think differently about technology than the security world has in the past. However, believe it or not, IT's mission is actually in many ways the same as security. They're here to reduce risk and lower costs. And they're being asked to do it with less and less money, or less and less resources at their behest. So they're turning to some of these mega trends in the industry, things that we've all heard of, things like cloud, like mobility, like flash, like something new called hyper-converged infrastructure. And it's not important to understand the details of what those technologies are, but the big thing that this is... Here we go, okay. The big thing that this is all leading to is the big buzzword in the IT world now is called the software-defined data center, or software-defined storage, software-defined networking, software-defined everything. What software-defined means is effectively replicating what used to require dedicated, big, complex, proprietary hardware, expensive things that required teams and teams of people to manage, and replicating it now through software. So, and doing it on standard off-the-shelf hardware solutions. So, lowering cost, lowering complexity, increasing the ability to scale, increasing the ability to adapt to the changes, not only in technology, but to the changes that the end users are seeing in the world of video surveillance and how they use that video. So now, oh, and don't take my word for it, by the way, there's a significant shift happening in the world of storage technologies. This is not necessarily related to just to video surveillance, but if you notice in orange, we have roughly a $40 billion a year industry for traditional storage technologies in the US, dominated by companies that we're all familiar with, that we're all aware of. Over the next decade, some of the big analysts now have predicted that significant disruption in this market. You're seeing this being overtaken now by this software-defined concept, this software-defined technology. And what's important about this, or what I want you to take away from this, is the companies leading that charge are a little bit different than the ones that we are used to seeing on a day-in, day-out basis. So there's a real paradigm shift happening in the world of storage, and that same thing is happening in the world of other types of information technology, and of course in video surveillance as well. So I'm going to turn it over now to Neil, who's going to talk a little bit about what UL's doing in the world of video.
Thanks so much, Brandon. I appreciate the introduction, and thanks to SIA for allowing me to be here. This is my first government summit, and I've had a great experience so far, and I've learned quite a lot, so thank you. I'm going to provide some brief remarks about a new standard that UL is working on for video for tactical operations. And before I do, I'd like to just give you a little bit of overview of UL. There may be some things that you're aware of, but some things, UL trivia that you may not be aware of. This year we celebrated our 122-year anniversary. We once were a startup company. We started with one person that got $350 to buy a lab bench and start testing electrical products above a fire station in Chicago. And today, we now are about 12,000 employees globally. We operate in about 113 different countries. Each year, we do nearly 100,000 product evaluations in just about every industry. And annually, there's probably about 22 billion marks on various different products that you'll find the UL in a circle mark. We also have, actually these numbers are even outdated, we have actually nearly 1,800 standards at the moment in various different industries. So what we do, what UL does, we got our start around testing, inspection, and certification for safety for common commercial and consumer products. And we've expanded to looking at things such as performance, reliability. We now do auditing, validation, training, and of course, developing standards continues to be a key component for what we do. So what I want to do is just give you an overview of this new standards initiative, what the scope of it is, where we're going with it, and some of the things we're looking to address for video for tactical operations. We got started here actually through a solicitation by the Interagency Board for Standards, Standardization and Interoperability. It's a joint group with DoD and DOJ who reached out on a variety of fronts, a variety of different technologies, looking for help from the private sector to help them develop standards for some of this new technology that law enforcement and government is using. And so we responded to that. We felt that we had the capabilities, given our background in the work that we do with the fire service and the personal protective equipment that they use, as well as law enforcement. And we also at the time had begun to develop some standards looking at things like image quality and other areas of performance. Some of the areas that this standard is intended to cover are really a variety of different devices. Devices that are intended to be for covert operations, could be hand-deployed cameras, pole-mounted, or of course body-worn cameras as well is probably the biggest topic of discussion at the moment. The standard, we're looking to address, obviously, any safety aspects of this technology, but also things like audio quality, image quality, the ruggedness. These devices are going to be used in some pretty harsh environments. Coffee is going to get spilt on them. They're probably going to be immersed in water. They'll be sweated on all day, be in various different harsh conditions. So they need to stand up to all those conditions. So that's certainly important. The reliability, they have to survive. The idea that law enforcement and government can replace these things every 3 months is just impractical. So they need to be rugged enough to survive those conditions. Also looking at things like data security, whether it's at transit or at rest. Is that data encrypted? How is it encrypted? What are the requirements around that? And of course, things like battery life, making sure that you have technology that could survive a shift or maybe an extended shift and operate reliably. Some of the current topics that the technical committee is currently, I would say, debating is this idea of should the standard require high definition or standard definition when it comes to image quality. And of course, the debate is there because of the data that's associated with the resolution for these devices. So that's certainly something that's yet to be resolved. I believe that the direction is going to be more around performance-based. If you have standard definition, it should function this way. If you have a high definition, it should function this way, as opposed to being prescriptive, because these devices are going to change. The second item relates to using your own device, bringing your own device, and like a mobile device. I mean, let's face it; these, our smartphones have some pretty good camera systems in them. It's going to continue to improve in technology. More sensors, more technology is going to continue to be packed into these devices. Your whole life is in this device, so why can't it be used for these applications as well? They're already being used. I mean, we know that law enforcement, government are using these devices. There's solution providers out there that can accommodate this type of technology. So I think the intent is to enable the technology and to have a standard that enables it but not limits it. And then finally, the idea of use cases and should the standard incorporate specific requirements for use cases. For example, if you have a camera in a covert application, somewhere in a dark parking lot somewhere, what should be the requirements for that type of application? Should the standard include those types of things? So why does this matter? Why is a standard important for video technology? We believe that it will enable better purchase decisions. Allow the end user, the people procuring this, expensive equipment, to make better decisions about price versus performance. It puts everybody on a level playing field with respect to minimum requirements. Doesn't restrict anybody from going above and beyond that, but to have a baseline to know what you're getting and to be, have the peace of mind that it meets some standard. And that all translates into better use of resources. If you're able to compare apples to apples for this technology, you can make those better price and performance decisions. Also, a standard allows the end user to have input into what this technology should meet, what their needs are. So they're at the table. Law enforcement, government is at the table with us developing the standard, and they have a very loud voice about what their specific needs are, as opposed to just having to choose from what's on the market today. I think the ideal scenario is for the end user to specify what it is that they want, that's within reason and practical to build for a reasonable amount of money, and then let the market go and do that. Let the market go and create those solutions. And then finally, we believe a standard, creates and enables that peace of mind for the people that use the technology, that it's going to work when it's needed. Much like a ballistic resistant vest. It should work when it's needed. You should never have to second guess. Like this clicker. There we go. So just a few notes on policy considerations, because I know this event is, certainly around policy, government policy and such, and so just some things to share there. With respect to federal, state, government, they can now consider, by having a published standard in the future, they can now consider using performance-based metrics versus specific technologies. So they can define what it is those metrics are that they need, for their technology versus just choosing only what exists on the market today. Also, it's going to enable more off-the-shelf products to be used and be purchased, as opposed to special, unique types of technology being created by some of the end users. A standard allows for more off-the-shelf products to be created and be used by the public sector. And then one key takeaway, and it's something, a lesson learned that we continue to learn as we develop standards, and that is the importance of having really a balanced stakeholder group at the table. All the parties that will be impacted by the standard, the end users, if it's integrators that are involved, the manufacturers, vendors, anybody that's involved in the value chain for that particular product, having them at the table is very important to get buy-in and to make sure that, in general, the industry gets what they're looking for. So when, currently right now, there's all kinds of groups, all kinds of law enforcement agencies wrestling with, really what we believe to be the more difficult side of it, and that is the privacy piece, the data storage, the cybersecurity piece. There's no easy answers to any of those things. How long do we keep the video? Where do we keep it? I think the technology piece is probably the easier part of it, and so I guess our advice and kind of extending the lesson learned is get all the stakeholders to the table when it comes to making those people and policy decisions for the use of body-worn and other video for tactical operations. So, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Can you tell us a little bit, Neil, just about the law enforcement in general and why that industry or that market in particular is in real need of these types of standards?
Yeah, I alluded to it in one of my slides. I think our law enforcement, our fire service, our military, they're squeezed. Let's face it. They do not have all the resources that they would like to have to do the things that they need to do, and so they're being asked to do more with less. And we believe that standards are a way to address inefficiencies in the market, make sure that they are able to get what they need, and you know, and do it in a cost-effective way. So standards helps do that. Are they the panacea? No, they're not. But we believe that they're a step in the right direction to make sure that there can be more efficient use of those scarce resources by the end users.
Good, thank you. Otto?
Good afternoon. I want to echo Neil's comments. This is also my first government summit, or at least first SIA, and I appreciate the opportunity. I'm humbled to be here, and as Brandon alluded to, there's a panel of experts. Well, I'm a disclaimer, I'm an expert at being an end user, so I know just enough technology to be dangerous. So if you have detailed technology questions, I'm sure my colleagues up here will support me. I'm from the city of Santa Ana, California, police officer for 20 years, been there for 16. Santa Ana, if you don't know about it, it borders Anaheim, which everybody knows. It's the home of Disneyland. It is the county seat for Orange County. We have 34 jurisdictions, including 2 private universities, University of California, Irvine, and Cal State University, Fullerton. It's the second largest by square mileage city in the county, 11th largest in the state, and it's home to multiple all levels of government, of agencies. We have U.S. Marshals, we have the FBI, we have the Ronald Reagan Federal Courthouse, a very historic downtown district, and then of course local municipal buildings. Neil alluded to it earlier, everybody's doing more with less nowadays. Our city's no exception. We faced bankruptcy about 4 years ago, and attrition of the officers at our department was, we were losing far more than we could hire. As a matter of fact, we had a hiring freeze. So in that sense, we had to do a lot more with less. Standards have been in the law enforcement community, you would like to have ideally 1 officer for every 1,000 residents, and we were running about 1 officer in the field for every 2,000, which brings a need for creativity and new resources to enhance the safety of the officers in the field. These are just some stats over the past few years. In 2005, the crime rate was 10% higher than the national average, and by 2008, it was almost 15% higher. Again, we had fewer officers than we needed, and by 2014, with a new city manager and a new vision, we created a 5-year strategic plan. Number 1 at the top of that plan was community and public safety, and that was with input from the community. Part of my duties in Homeland Security Division is our office manages the UASI grant, which is a Department of Homeland Security grant for Orange County, whose funds are specifically relegated for helping first responders, and that's police, fire, emergency management, respond to, better prepare for acts of terrorism. In that vein, we did a project in 2008, which was replacing an existing and antiquated camera system, and that's really how I got involved in this. We hired an integrator called Siemens to come in and fix a broken system that never really worked. It turned out to be very successful, and so successful, in fact, that I started looking at other cities around the country to see what they were doing. Cameras were becoming more and more into the fold for municipalities and businesses alike. So we started and decided we wanted to expand into our civic center. Part of the funds from UASI are used to do critical infrastructure protection, and although cameras are not the ultimate protection, they can be a great deterrent, and they can provide great evidentiary value after the fact and an investigative tool. So we took that on. Under the grant, some of our goals for doing that were creating a comprehensive surveillance coverage throughout the civic center, video sharing for multi-agencies. We have all these different levels of government. Public and private partnerships are going to be a necessity. Businesses and other entities around all have their own camera systems. They're all disparate. How do we leverage those without incurring too much cost for ourselves? Cities and local governments have limited funds, so we really had to get creative, and I'll explain how we did that. Also, the real-time information benefit of video systems is invaluable. It provides that common operating picture and that situational awareness for responders in an emergency. Planned events are one thing, but unplanned events are a whole thing altogether different. And then really centralizing our operations. This picture you see up here is of our Department Operations Center. It's kind of a mini EOC for our police department. And what you're looking at is a video wall that we have, and that is our local cameras up on the screen. So what we did was, I think the next slide is the challenges. What we did was we used the grant funds. We expanded our camera system into our Civic Center. We ended up putting about 70 cameras throughout our Civic Center, and we tied them into our existing system. Now, how we did that was we had to go to all these different entities because we did an assessment of the area and said, where are the best places to put these cameras and how are we going to get the most bang for our buck in terms of what we can see. The problem was we didn't own any of the structures around there. And we couldn't very well go and say, hey, we're going to drill some holes in your walls and put our cameras up there and you're going to like it, and that's it. We kind of had to figure out a way, since we didn't have unlimited funds, to make it worth their while. So we approached them and we talked to them about how can we do this, and we decided if we can solve the problem in a non-penetrating fashion, in other words, putting cameras on other people's buildings without penetrating their structure at low to no cost to them, and then share the feeds with them, that was a way to get buy-in. And that's what we ended up doing. Sorry. We found through our integrator Siemens, the person to the right of me, Rob Heil, who at the time was with SureView Systems, who had a software that did exactly what we wanted. It integrated disparate video systems, allowed us to share ours, and it allowed us to accomplish that securely without them interfering or invading our network through a web-based interface. So when we approached them, we said, look, let us put 3 cameras on your roof, let us draw 110 power, we will give you the feeds of every camera in the Civic Center. So most of these places had their own camera systems that looked out, but none of them had cameras that looked at the front of their building. So if you can imagine, the courthouse has some raucous protest going on out front, they can look out, but they can't see that other perspective, which does provide its own benefit. So we said, we'll give you the feeds, and you'll know when the march is coming your way because you're going to have all 60 cameras in the Civic Center on your screen through this interface, SureView. And then at some point down the road, maybe you can share your cameras with us, which would also be populated in a SureView. And that's really how we got the buy-in, and it worked out better than expected. So well that we're now expanding into our downtown district, which is nothing but private business, and we're taking the same approach with them. And the big carrot to them also was there was no cost to them whatsoever. So what this is here is our mobile command post, and it's displaying some of the cameras through SureView that we have. One of the other success stories in our first public-private partnership we worked out was with a private high school in Santa Ana called Modern Day High School. They came to us actually and said, hey, we have 200 cameras on our campus, we'd like to share it with you. And schools, as you know, are a hot topic, and any way we can get better situational awareness at a school, we're going to take it. So we already had SureView, we populated their cameras into our system, and now if anything ever goes on at that school, we're going to know way before officers ever get there. So we've integrated the various systems, we accomplished that. We automated the manual process, and the manual process being one of the other challenges was, you know, all these places have their own camera systems. In an emergency, I can't sit there and try to remember 50 logons for 50 systems, right? So if everything is in SureView, which just streamlined everything and centralized it, I have one logon for SureView and I have access to whatever I need. So that was a huge success for us. Results, I kind of covered some of them already. video sharing with other cities, another huge success story that Sherview brought to us, which was something we never anticipated. You all remember the Kelly Thomas trial. It was national news. The trial took place of the officers in our city. Well, every day on a daily basis, Fullerton Police Department would send 2 or 3 officers down to monitor the protests that were going on. When we put this online, we called the watch commander and said, "Watch commander, here's a log on. Give it to whomever you want. As long as this trial is going on, feel free to log in and look at our courthouse, and you don't have to don't have to send the officers down there." So it saved other agencies' resources as well, and it was really a huge benefit and a huge plus. And if you can imagine that on a grander scale, we could theoretically give access to anybody in the county at will, and we can pull their access when an incident's over. So it was a huge savings. And this is just a picture of our mobile command vehicle. This was also purchased with UASI funds. I don't know, to be honest with you, where we'd be today if we didn't have that grant. And I think I can speak for a lot of local municipal agencies around the country who are suffering with the economy like we were. This vehicle was about a $500,000 vehicle. 6 years later, I put $122,000 of technology upgrades into it, including some of which you saw in that picture. And we use this for managing large-scale incidents anywhere in the county. It's a regional asset that we share, and we can stream all that video capability within the vehicle as well. So that's my slide. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Otto. I know the concept, the idea of public-private partnerships is obviously a very important topic now, particularly as it relates to improving situational awareness and things like that. What was the biggest challenge that you ran into as you were developing this public-private partnership plan?
Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier. Really, the issue was we're going to come to these different entities and different businesses and ask them for something. We need to be able to offer them something back. We need to make it worth their while. Everybody's strapped. So our goal really at that point was, our biggest answer was to share everything we have with them. I mean, there's really no reason not to, as long as we're not relinquishing control of anything. They're just looking at it. There's nothing secret about the video camera. It's nothing anybody walking down the street can't see, so why not share it? And that was huge. That was of huge value to them, because we're not just giving them a view of their building, we're giving them a view of the entire area, which was a huge benefit. And Federal Protective Service that works the federal buildings in downtown really took advantage of that. And now it's being used on an almost daily basis by these people, and it's helping them solve their own problems. So.
Good. Okay, thank you. Okay, now to Rob.
Thank you. I was very fortunate to have been part of a number of CS Summits, not only as a manufacturer, but also as an integrator. And most recently, I joined Security. All right, we'll get this down here. There we go. About a month and a half ago, I joined Security Systems. I'm the general manager in Florida, and my responsibility is basically the entire state other than the Panhandle. Really excited about it. A couple of things I'll mention just quickly is about 10% of our revenue is hosted and managed services, which is very unique for an integrator. How many other integrators are in this room? I got Chinega. I know we had X-Tech, a couple. Good. Well, you know, this is exciting because I've been a big supporter of the CS Summit, and your integrators are the conduit between the manufacturers and your policies. We're the ones that are going to make it all work and tie it all together. So if they're not here, you might want to go back and ask them why. And you know, we're going to get into some details here in a few minutes that are going to explain why it's really important that your integrators are here and why they're learning about some of these new technologies that are coming. Okay, there's got to be something wrong here. There we go. So let me give you the integrator's perspective, and I'm going to tie in a little bit about what Officer Laufer said. And oh, by the way, you guys are in for a treat, because thank God you stayed, because Officer Laufer is going to use his taser on Don Erickson after this session. So, So really, there's some key considerations and why the integrator is really important when you're doing something like this that I want to kind of go over. But really, the customer goals and objectives. I mean, we spent with the city of Santa Ana countless hours just really learning what their goals and objectives are, so we could help them solve their problems and challenges. You know, network requirements. They were very fortunate to have, as part of their grant process, the ability of putting in their own VLAN specifically for DHS and part of UASI. A lot of organizations don't have that. But they still had the challenge where they didn't want other organizations on their network. They didn't want that vulnerability. We've talked about it for the last 2 days. It's really important. So having a system that was browser-based, that used current updated security technology like SSL and salted hash, multicasting. Of course, we've got a lot of new stuff coming out with the new UL standards that are coming that we'll get into later. But this is all very important. And if you don't have an integrator that understands these technologies, you need to run. You know, if you have an integrator that wants to keep an open port 800 open and they want to be able to log in anytime they can and they don't want to change the passwords, get rid of them, because those days are over. I mean, you really have the ability with things like LogMe and Rescue today to lock down those ports, let your integrator come in only when they need to come in and service the system. And by the way, some of these standards that are coming are going to get rid of passwords. We're following down the same path that the access control guys did with things called CHUIDs, okay? We're going to have chaves, and we're going to go over that in a little while, what a chave is. But really exciting times for the video. Really exciting times for security of video networks are coming. And your integrators need to be at the point of the spear on that, okay? Data security, we just got all over that. Interoperability is a big deal. We've got some great standards in the industry. You've got things that have happened through SIA, the OSIP standard, you've got ONVIF, you've got PSIA. But still, there's a disconnect in this industry about interoperability across devices. Having something like a PSIM at the top that brings those systems in essence, becomes that standard, that you can share that information between those organizations is a really important piece. Image and recording quality. You got prosecution-style video you got to provide these officers, or they can't do anything with it. And that changes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Harsh environments. How many times have you seen a camera up on the side of a building, 8 feet in the air, where the network connection's exposed? You're sitting there looking at the Cat5, and you're sitting there and you can just go unplug it. Harsh environments aren't just IP rated. I mean, harsh environments are seal that sucker so nobody can get to it. That's part of the security requirements, okay? So you got to take that into consideration. Information sharing requirements. There's a number of current video systems today that once you get above 1 or 2 simultaneous streams, it's going to crash the VMS, or it's going to crash the DVR, NVR. That's absolutely useless to an officer that's trying to share video simultaneously with how many organizations? 10, 12, 15 organizations looking at your cameras at the same time? So you have to have these considerations in place when you start looking at doing a project like this. And maintenance and ongoing support. UASI doesn't include that. Right? So you need to include 5 years of ongoing support and maintenance when you're doing some type of a grant program. It's ludicrous because you can't give these guys a tool if they can't service it. So you got to keep that in mind as well. So, and that's where that long-term growth potential comes in. That's where you get in the foxhole with your customer, manufacturer, integrator, and customer, and you come up with a long-term strategy that's gonna last them a long time. So that's kind of where I'm gonna get off my soapbox. And in summary, what you end up with is this. You've got really an enhanced crime-fighting tool, lower spend, safer environment, attracts new businesses and residents, drives revenue. These guys were suffering from a financial crisis where now the city is robust. People feel comfortable going down there. They're spending money. They're eating in the restaurants. They're building residential complexes there now. So it's really a win-win all around. And it really lowers the TCO because you're sharing the cost across all of those public and private partners. So.
Great, thank you, Rob. And if I can ask you to expand on that a little bit, can you talk about how your role as a security integrator changes now with the introduction of these additional public-private partnerships and different stakeholders that are involved in the process?
Yeah, that's a good point. It is somewhat of a challenge when you're talking across multiple agencies and multiple private organizations because typically there's multiple integrators involved. And we don't like each other in most cases. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We always have our different ideas and things like that. So that becomes a challenge. So our role really becomes kind of a customer advocate. Now we have to go bring our integrator partners, our integrator competitors, if you will, to the table, and I call it coopetition, right? So here we're all going to come together and we're going to sit around a table from each other, and we're going to solve the customer's problems, because it's not just my customer, it's their customer. Okay, and it could be potentially another, but 3 or 4 integrators' customers. In the city of Santa Ana, there's multiple integrators that are involved. Siemens just happens to be the one that sits on top of it. But they do a good job of kind of bringing all those parts and pieces together. So I think it really becomes a champion with the customer, more of a consultant, if you will, to try to bring those parts and pieces together. And not be upset if you don't get the entire piece of the pie.
Okay. And I'd like to pose just another question to the whole panel about cybersecurity. And how does cybersecurity, or how is cybersecurity now playing a bigger role in all the various elements that you're involved with?
I can kick that off. It really is the common thread, it seems, at least in the areas in which I'm familiar, whether it's physical security products and systems, life safety and security systems, video, what have you, anything that's got a network connection, anything that's being interconnected and integrated with other technology, cyber is going to be the concern. We at UL view it as the sort of the fire, risk that existed at the turn of the century. We look at it from a risk standpoint, and it's definitely one of those growing risks. There's lots of advantages in having all this equipment connected together, sharing data. There's incredible things you can do with it, but there's also the risk of having it all connected as well. And so I think cyber is very much at the top of the list when it comes to risks. So it's something that we're very mindful of and starting to incorporate in our standards. Our clients are asking us to offer services, develop standards for cybersecurity. It's something that we have to do to stay relevant. It's not something that we could put our head in the sand and avoid, because it's hard. It is hard. We certainly don't have all the answers, but I think the community, the industry is working together. I think we'll be able to help address this issue, which there is no silver bullet for. It's something that you've got to constantly stay on top of and be diligent, and it changes every single day, which is a very different paradigm than what UL is used to. The idea that almost doing what we traditionally do in real time and making it practical, making it cost effective, that's a real challenge for a 122-year-old company. But that's what keeps me really excited and coming to work every day. So
I'll kind of jump in. I alluded to this a little while ago. There's a mandate going into 2017 that's going to get catch a lot of people by surprise. You've got UL working on their update of 3802. You've got FIPS 140-2 Level 3. You've got 800.53 out of NIST. You've got 800.171 Revision A out of NIST. All of these standards are going to merge. And this is not just going to impact federal government. Sony, Viacom. These are big companies that are looking at what's going on with the federal government right now, and all of these standards are going to impact video encryption. We talked about the CHAVE, the credential for video encryption. That's going to be following right down the path. There's going to be validations of systems. There's going to be approved product list for manufacturers. They're going to have to meet these standards. So, and I'm not going to pick on any manufacturer, but we've avoided standards in this industry so long, we're going to be forced to do it now. We're going to be forced to do it because of cyber terrorism. And I think, unfortunately, that's a good thing for us, because we're going to have to get up to speed. And not just the manufacturers. As an integrator, we're going to have to be certified to install these systems, because we're going to have to get a smart card. And we're only going to get access to these systems if we have the right PKI information. So get ready. It's coming.
Do we have any questions in the audience?
I was just curious, since the data storage is going to increase, and then we have Netflix and all this other stuff, is the carbon footprint anything that you guys think about, or is that just something, I'm just curious.
I can talk a little bit about that. From what we've seen, Yes, absolutely. You're seeing, particularly when it comes to storage infrastructure, you're seeing this just increase significantly in the amount of power, the amount of cooling, the amount of just physical space it requires to manage all this is becoming a real challenge. Not only in the sense of end users running out of space, but costs associated with it, and as you mentioned, the environmental impacts and the carbon footprint impacts. So they're looking for technologies that help them reduce that, right? And maybe it's not a technology that directly looks at carbon footprint per se, but that helps them reduce power requirements, cooling requirements, real estate, rack space requirements, things like that. Absolutely, you're seeing a greater demand for that. I showed the stat earlier that showed the amount of data being generated is doubling like every 18 months. So how do you keep up with that? You know, how do you keep, hard drives can only get so big, right? In fact, we're approaching a physical limit in hard drive sizes and technology. So how do we keep up with that, keep ahead of it? And there's some really neat technologies coming down the pike to help address those kind of things, but a lot of it's being driven by, you know, what are the environmental impacts?
And I'll add one thing. That's a great question. Not one I would expect in this panel, but it's a really great one. And some of the observations that we made is that there seems to be some appetite in the marketplace for sustainability for data centers because of the amount of energy consumed, the amount of energy that's lost, that's just waste, the amount of water that's used for these facilities to keep them cool and such. So I think there is a real appetite in for some companies that specialize in data center design, construction, what have you, to be able to have these things more sustainable because they're just going to continue to pop up like mushrooms. The more we saw the stats on video. It's they'll continue to be built. A lot more modular construction these days. They can't build them fast enough. So I think it would be a great, fantastic business for somebody out there to get into.
Yep.
Question for Officer Laufer. First, kudos to Siemens and Santa Ana Police Department for putting together what sounds like a best practice and the best operations. My question is this: do you have a sister city internationally as you are a international city?
Yeah, we do. I can tell you it's in South America. I can't tell you what city it is, but we do have a sister city.
So the follow-up is, would you be willing to go to that sister city and share your best practice on community safety with them? Because what you've integrated at your city is something remarkable, and a public-private partnership where private buildings have public cameras on them, and public cameras are used by private sector who are qualified to read them. It's a great story. It needs to be told more often. Again, kudos to both of you up there for putting this together.
I really appreciate that comment. Thank you. Yeah, and we have been recognized for that model, and it's really because we were forced into it because we didn't have the economy to do it, but there was a need and all the right things aligned. And I feel fortunate to have been a part of it. In terms of sharing it, I share it every chance I get, and I'm sure Rob does as well. And I'd gladly share it with the sister city or anybody else who wanted to hear it. I have looked at other citywide systems, and that's really what our system's turning into. Because of the success of the Civic Center, Parks and Rec called my desk and said, can you help us do our parks? The library called us, can you help us do the library? And the downtown businesses were working on a model of incorporating sharing their cameras, or at least installing cameras if they don't have them, with their business permits, in which case they get their business permit, we get their feed, we share some of the feeds with them, and it's a win-win for everybody. And it really all got started. The reason we got that wall that you saw in the picture and got further down the road was there was a murder at a nightclub in downtown Santa Ana of a young Vietnamese girl who was coldly murdered. And my video wall project happened to be going in front of city council the next Monday, and right place, right time, they said, why don't we have cameras downtown? And so as a result, I said, well, as a matter of fact, we'd love to do that, but 2 years ago, you didn't like that idea. Well, now they loved it, and I'm right smack dab in the middle of a project to put 80 new cameras in our historic downtown district, and start building those public-private partnerships with the local merchants who have their own cameras. And we're also installing code blue monuments throughout downtown with emergency buttons and additional cameras on them. So.
Question for Neil, UL. Can I get a timeline on 3802?
I wish it was today. So if anybody's ever been involved in standards development, especially the consensus kind, sometimes it's like sausage making. It takes a while. You don't like what goes into it. You don't want to see how it's done. Really, I think it's I think an optimistic time frame would probably be a year from now, just based on where the technical committee is today. It really is going to depend upon how aggressive the technical committee wants to move on it, and really the scope of the standard that they want to tackle. My advice to them, if they're getting hung up in certain aspects of a standard, is to limit the scope, at least to start, and you could always add to it. It's a standard that lives, it evolves. So that's the tough thing about standards development, is it's all voluntary, right? It's people coming to the table. They're not getting paid necessarily to spend their time to develop it, and so that's a real challenge. We're trying to use technology, leverage video conferencing and other things, get smart about how we organize these technical committees and segment the work. So I would appreciate anybody that is interested in participating in the committee. Please see me at lunch or afterwards. You can participate at any level that you wish. Right now we've got about 25 people, which I think is a good amount of people broken up in various different task groups. So I don't have a really good answer for you, other than to say optimistically a year from now. But I would love for anybody to come in and put pressure on the technical committee to get it done. So, thank you.
Okay, one more? Yep, okay.
Hello. Okay. For Neil, and following up, though I didn't know I was going to be following up, I noticed on the one of your slides, it had several different ways cameras might be deployed. And in lieu of the previous panel, I didn't see anything about drone or unmanned vehicle cameras. And from a tactical situation, I'm wondering, I don't want to make your standard go longer in development, but that might be an area to add.
Yeah, I don't have a great response to that. I don't know if that's come up in the technical committee, if they've considered video that's used on these UAVs. Yeah, my sense would be we'd probably be boiling the ocean if we start adding more of those. But I mean, clearly we saw it today in the presentation that the panel discussion right before ours that's we're only going to see that grow. So I'll throw that piece of red meat into the committee and see how they want to address that. So yeah, good point. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I think thank you very much for your great content for us today, and we're heading off for lunch.
Thank you.